So has Nerdrotic gone full-blown crazy by allowing Alex Jones onto his show Friday Night Tights, or as some people have mockingly called it, Friday Night Whites? Although, to be fair to him, he does sometimes have on Hispanic and Asian people, but it is mostly a bunch of white men complaining that, oh, we don't get to see any white men in theaters anymore. I don't see them in the cinema. I don't see them in video games. Right, because, there are no white people in cinema anymore. None. Zero. They've just disappeared magically. Okay, so as a cultural commentator, as you can tell, I don't have a lot of respect for Gary. He used to be pretty good on Game of Thrones. He's still pretty good with some comic book lore. But aside from his very specialized areas, he's a complete idiot and moron and not very reliable. And now he's stepping into all new kinds of levels of craziness by having on Alex Jones. But I am going to take a stance which even people who I like and I think are fine with you, like Mad Max or Matt Jarbo or others, they're probably going nutsoid over this and think this is terrible. Alex Jones is a weirdo, extremist, conspiracy theorist guy, and he is. Alex is definitely into conspiracy theories. He's big into it. He's a very famous figure within conspiracy theory circles. But I first have two issues here. One is the free speech issue, which is like, let's just let the man speak. You don't like what he has to say, you don't have to listen to what he says. You don't have to believe everything he says, but let him speak. And I think there's no doubt he's being censored over and over and over again by the corporate media. They don't really allow him to speak. They always demonize him. So I think there is some cause for concern that he's going to go on any outlet that lets him speak freely. So from that angle, I have no issue with that. But I don't think any of these guys care about free speech. They don't care about it at all. They've been shown over and over again to be hypocritical. They constantly try to cancel people. They constantly demonize their opponents. They have no respect for free speech or anything, for free debate or even accurate information. They often run with wild conspiracy rumors. So I don't have a lot of respect for their so-called free speech stance. And just recently I reported that Gary just kicked people out for showing up at an event that was supposed to be meant for all fans because, reasons. He's Big Gary now. He gets to decide who comes into a public space because he's Nerdrotic or whatever. So in terms of the censorship angle, he's got a very weak record, so he's not very impressive. But now let's get into the substance of the thing itself. Is it even right to even speak on conspiracy theories at all? Now, I've actually done quite a few videos on conspiracy theory, but from a kind of analytic angle. And you really can't avoid it because a huge amount of the public does believe them. And let me just give two short case studies to verify that conspiracy thinking is viable, again, in some cases. One of them is now something that's become more and more public, but for a long time was a complete secret, which is the case of genocide supported by the CIA in Indonesia in 1965. It's a very famous case, but it was buried in secrets for a long time. But now we have no doubt, despite a lot of misleading framing by the mass media, that the CIA was intimately involved in massacring hundreds of thousands of people in Indonesia and helping the fascist regime take over. And this was kept secret for decades. They also helped commit genocide in East Timor. But again, after decades and decades of slowly going through the record, now we have a much better picture. And the idea that they were just standing aside or they were passive is not true. They were actively involved in committing genocide. So that's pretty harsh. And then we have the case of the Vietnam War, which is even more well documented, where for decades the government was just lying about how deeply involved it was in Vietnam, denying that there was any military intervention or denying that it was taking even a political stance. And now we know that's just not true. For a very, very long time, they were intervening, sending secret CIA teams, and they were secretly manipulating politics behind the scenes. So conspiracies are real. They do happen. Secrets are kept even successfully for decades and decades, and nothing comes out. And we just have too many things we can list. The coup in Iran-Contra. You go through the list. So there are places where conspiracies are real. Now, I'm not into all this stuff too much. I honestly don't care who killed Kennedy. I just don't. I think he's a really evil man. I don't care who killed Kennedy. But you have to make allowances. In some cases, conspiracy theorists are on the right track. But nevertheless, I think you want to be responsible for this. When Oliver Stone talks about conspiracy theories, I take him seriously. But even Oliver admits for a lot of accidents in history, he doesn't think everything's a conspiracy. So I think there's a time and place for these things. I think people like William Blum, Oliver Stone, when they get into the conspiracy stuff, I take them seriously. They try to do their homework. They give you a lot of references. You don't have to believe everything they're saying, but you can double check the information. But Alex, I don't think is totally terrible. I understand his fears about the government and all those things. I think those are well justified. but he's not as responsible. He does put out really bad information, but he's not crazy. I'd highly recommend a conversation he had with Noam Chomsky. I thought it was really good. I thought it was very productive. I thought they were both very rational and sane, and they touched on a lot of interesting areas. And Noam Chomsky himself is not with conspiracy theories, but he does allow interviews where that topic gets brought up because he did a book on Vietnam and JFK. But I myself just follow the more Chomsky, C. Wright Mills route. These are power systems. Elites just use power, and the media is a form of power. But I have doubts that conspiracy theories in a large sense are true. They're only going to be true in some cases. They're significant cases, but I think, more normal day-to-day policymaking is fairly public, though there is obviously a lot of secret meetings and a lot of collaborations we don't know about. So in terms of conspiracy theories, it's fine if you approach it with just some caution and skepticism. The way I would rank it is somebody like Oliver Stone, he's sort of at the top. Alex Jones is in the middle. But then you have a lot of people that are empowered by, unfortunately, the more responsible people, and they do say and do crazy things. And I think that's the danger with what Nerdrotic is doing, is he's legitimizing Alex Jones for a lot of people, but he's not being very careful. He's just throwing a lot of meat to his audience. He's just riling people up, and it could explode in his face. And if it does, he's the only one to blame. I don't believe him that he wants to have a conversation. I don't believe him that he's against censorship. Even though they're trying to manipulate Alex is actually using them to get much more subscribers and more money. So I think both sides of the table kind of know what they're doing. They're just advertising themselves. I don't distrust Alex entirely, but he did some crazy stuff before. He's still doing some crazy stuff now. And I can't stand with him when he backs Trump, because I think Trump was a monster. But I don't think censorship is the way to approach this. It's just be calm, assess what he says, believe it, don't believe it, follow up on it, don't follow up on it, but don't censor him. Just let the air in. But in terms of the Friday nights thing itself, apparently it was really a non-event. He just stayed on for an hour, then he left. I didn't see the whole thing, but yeah, it just went through the normal thing. A lot of skepticism about the virus and certain restrictions, and I think those make sense. I don't necessarily believe him, but I don't think probably that the virus is all some government conspiracy. But are they taking advantage of it? Yeah, but that's what governments do. I actually here am giving a tentative thumbs up for them having a conversation with Alex, but I don't think they're doing it for the right reasons. I think they're just grifting again. And you could tell Jeremy was very uncomfortable in certain places because he clearly wants to have it both ways. He just wants to have a lot of free promotion. And he himself has done some conspiracy stuff, but he's not a serious person. He's not an educated person. So he's just putting out a lot of crazy stuff and is not taking responsibility for it. So we're going to see how this plays out. But I don't believe just having Alex on proves that the Friday night people are a bunch of KKK fascist idiot people. But are they playing with dynamite? And are they getting close to the neo-fascism? They're playing with dynamite. They are playing with neo-fascism. And no good can come of that. And it is going to explode in their face. And I'm going to laugh at them when it does. But again, onto itself, it's fine. You can talk to Alex. You can watch Alex videos. It's fine. You can study conspiracy theories. You can even get into this stuff. I just think be skeptical with the information you have. That's my stance on these issues. Thanks for listening.